Okay, yeah, go for it, Alicia.
Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our webinar today in collaboration with Dawes Travel. So my name is Alicia Gallier. I'm Business Development Manager for One Nucleus. So our webinar today has come about as part of a collaborative relationship between One Nucleus and Dawes, as One Nucleus was looking for a way to support its members with their international business travel. It also makes sense given Dawes' physical presence in Cambridge and London. So we're delighted to be able to tailor our content to the needs of our members today. So shortly, I'll be handing over to Laura Busby, who's Head of Sales, and Aman Poccarini, who's Consulting Manager. So the topics today are going to cover the current landscape, so what we are currently experiencing. Dawes are also going to give an overview of their current activities, so how they're engaging with their clients at the moment. And then we're going to focus more on future predictions. So what can travellers expect? What will recovery look like? And also any tips and suggestions for business travellers moving forward. I'd also like to say that we will be doing a separate Q&A session at the end after the presentation. And we really do welcome your questions and thoughts. To do that, please use the chat box function. So if you were to hover over your screen, the toolbar should appear at the bottom that says chat. So please enter your questions into there and then I'll read those out at the end. Just to add, please remain muted, and also we are recording the session today so that we may use it as on-demand content afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Laura and Aman. I hope you all enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and thank you to all of you for attending. We have 36 people on now, so yeah, really nice, really nice number to get going with. Just as a bit of an overview, Dawes have partnered with One Nucleus for over a year now. If you want any information on our relationship and to get in touch, there's this web link here. Please feel free to follow that and you'll be able to see a little bit more about our services and what's available for One Nucleus members. So I'm Laura Busby, I'm Head of Sales at Dawes Group. And Aman?
Good afternoon, I'm Aman Poccarini. I'm based in London and I am the Dawes Head of Consulting.
Great. So just as a quick overview in terms of what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start off with an introduction and some hot topics of what everyone's talking about, the travel industry. We'll go on to the current landscape and how travel is looking both in the UK and across the globe. We'll give you an insight into our business. Not the easiest time to be in travel, so we'll give you a bit of a warts and all of what's happening in our particular business. We'll talk about the future of the industry. And we'll spend a majority of the session on how to future-proof your travel program moving forward with some really hopefully useful and practical hints and tips for you. So many thanks to all of the members who completed the recent survey, which talks about which asked quite a lot of great questions about business travel, and myself and Aman put this presentation together in line with the feedback that you gave. So I've copy and pasted this and shared the results as they came in because we thought they were really interesting. So over half of the members felt that business travel would remain reduced after we're out of lockdown, and probably the most interesting piece of the whole survey was that a barrier to resuming travel was largely based on staff confidence. So there's a couple of areas with the barriers to resuming travel that we can hopefully give you some really good hints and tips and practical advice on how to increase staff confidence, keep your business safe, and obviously avoid any financial risk. So again, that's what we'll focus a lot of our attention on today. So I'm just admitting some more people in. Okay, great. So we'll just give you a little bit of an introduction into Dawes and what we're about as a business. So we were the first travel management company to gain an IATA license back in the 1920s, and currently are the 14th largest travel management company in the UK, and the largest family owned. So we're owned by the Inchcape family, who've had an involvement with us since the 60s. So quite stable ownership, which will help us ride the ride the rough wave that's going across the travel industry at the moment. Probably quite a big point for us was that our CEO, Suzanne Horner, joined us in 2011. She is now the chair of the Business Travel Association, and the first ever female chair. So it's something we're really proud of, and something that's really helps us drive innovation and try to do things a little bit differently from both a service and a technology point of view. We're also part of the Radius Global Travel Network, which means we're part of a global framework which turns over $30 billion, and means that for companies that require a global travel program, we can partner up under a global framework to give clients a complete one global contract across the globe. So really quick overview of us. I think the one reason it's worked really well with Nucleus is we are the only travel management company to have an actual premises on the Cambridge Science Park, and I know there's a few of our clients based there who are on this call today, so welcome to you as well, and also premises in London. So I think as we move out of COVID-19, I think client and travel management company partnership will become ever more important, and I think that local relationship can really help. Alongside business travel, we also have a leisure arm of our business and an events arm of our business, which again are all available to look at in the One Nucleus link, which you'll get as a follow-up to this presentation. So we'll move on to the impact, and over to you, Amanda, just to talk about what the state of the global landscape as it stands. Oh, I've unmuted him.
Right, thank you, Laura. So at the height of the pandemic, which was around early April, so 75% of the world's population, what countries were under total travel ban, with an additional 19% that had some kind of restrictions. So that's unprecedented. We all know that, especially in a global economy. That had a tremendous impact on the hospitality sector, when as many as 7 in every 10 employees were under furlough or made redundant. And this, in terms of impact to the travel industry, this is 14 times worse than 9/11. The world economy is expected to shrink by between 5.2 and 4.8%, which effectively, if you look at it from a UK perspective, the unemployment levels are expected to be at around 3 million once the furlough schemes, by the end of the year, once the furlough schemes end. And we started off by being less than 500,000. So it just gives you an idea of the scale of the impact. Undoubtedly, it's not been a positive, and I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to tell you that. If we move on to the next slide, please, Laura. So at Grey Doors, we've developed a tracker. I referred to the border restrictions before. What I wanted to illustrate is that, so what you're seeing color-wise is that green means no restrictions in terms of borders. Orange means some restrictions, and then you'll see that red is total lockdown. So in March, it was very much concentrated towards a South Asian, Middle Eastern pandemic. By May, it had reached Europe in terms of lockdowns. You'll see that the UK remains green in terms of we didn't actually impose a quarantine. This chart actually needs to be updated because as of Monday, the UK imposed a quarantine, so we would be orange now, when ironically we're seeing a number of our European partners open up their boundaries and remove quarantine. So we've seen that from Greece, Germany following suit, Italy also. The countries that predominantly rely on tourism are implementing these changes, opening up and putting together what is being referred to as air bridges. So bilateral agreements between countries that have got their viruses under control, frankly better than we do, and opening up those kind of agreements to allow, especially ahead of the critical summer period for tourism. Business travel takes place, usually the peak of it commences from September, so we'll see how that goes in regards to critical points such as London to New York, London to San Francisco, London to Beijing, London to Dubai. These are key determinants for our industry in particular.
Great, thanks, Aman. So we're just going to give you a little insight into what's been going on in our world. I notice I've used the acronym TMC, so that's Travel Management Company for people not familiar with the industry. I'm sure there's as much jargon in the pharmaceutical and legal world, which I think most of you are part of on the call as there is in the travel world. So we'll give you a little insight into our world at the moment. So I think in terms of operationally, there's probably been kind of three key things, three key messages where we've been supporting our customers. So firstly, repatriation. So we had a whole heap of customers that were all over the world when the outbreak really started to hit and countries started to go into lockdown. So we have an in-house 24/7 team available to bring those customers home safely. Quite interesting, we've had 12 key worker groups continually travelling throughout the pandemic, which has caused a different kind of issue, I suppose, to normal, be it customers fitting broadband lines underground to a company we work with called Lifeways, who work with vulnerable adults to lead independent lives. So supporting the key worker groups has been a real key thing for us. And I think because we're part of the Business Travel Association, which is obviously chaired by our CEO, it's meant that we've been able to get that up-to-date advice and information on which hotels are open, which are closed, and starting to advise our travellers in a different way. So you might want to stay at a hotel that's got dining facilities in the hotel, so you don't have to go out. And I think the last thing anyone wants to do at the minute is have to go to a supermarket or try and find some kind of hot food somewhere else. So repatriation and support of those key worker groups has been quite key for us, and I think that's where, as a travel management company, we kind of have to come into our own and really provide our customers with absolute white glove hand-holding service, because the industry and our supply network is changing so rapidly. Refunds have been huge. So just to give you a bit of an example of the numbers, so during the first month of lockdown, as a business, we still made 9,084 bookings across the company. The key stat for me was what came after, and this shocked me when I spoke to our operations team, is that during the same month, we completed 10,182 changes. So we actually completed more changes than we did actual fresh bookings, which obviously, in terms of our turnover and where that takes as a business, it's a tough time for everyone in the travel industry. But I think what that shows is our worth as a travel management company. I think for anyone that's booked their own trips, be it leisure or business during this time, trying to get in touch with suppliers, be it airlines, hotel groups, to talk about, changing tickets, looking at refunds. It's quite tough. It's quite difficult to get through to anyone. And if anyone watches Good Morning Britain, I think Piers Morgan was moaning about it yesterday. So that's where a travel management company, again, can really add some value. We've got direct lines into all supplier groups, and that's what we've worked really hard to do to get those changes made, or changes or cancellations, I should say, and where possible, get the customers' money back in their bank account. And return. So a key thing is we're starting to see a lot of routes, a lot of positivity now in terms of clients coming back and returning to business travel. So what we're, as a real general thing, clients who either make things or sell things, we're seeing that they want to start traveling again, particularly in the financial world, where they don't really like to do much virtually still. We're seeing that a lot of our financial customers are starting to book tickets, be it fully flexible tickets, maybe quite far in advance. There's some good fully flexible fares around at the minute, so we're starting to see a lot of customers do that. At a more strategic level, what we're doing for all of our customers is mapping their travel profiles versus hotspots, so we can see where they have travelled and where is likely to cause problems, and give them quite tailored advice in the countries that they're generally going to be wanting to go to. So
just so I can add to that, Laura.
Sure.
In terms of stats, very quickly, is that Laura talks about the number of refunds and changes that we're now seeing is actually exceeding the amount of bookings that we're making. Before COVID-19, that trended within our customer base as being, out of every 100 transactions that we would do, 5 of them would incur some kind of change. So you can see it's almost totally reversed. And in addition to that, what we're noticing that at Grey Doors is that 1 in every 2 transactions prior to COVID-19 were booked online. And now we're seeing that it's actually 8 in every 2 are being booked offline, therefore using an agent. And it's and the questions that they're being asked is far more about, checking about safety, border restrictions, and those kind of things. So that it's gone a little bit back in terms of moving from being low touch in terms of booking through the web, and now people are requiring a bit more expertise, which is great to see from a travel management company.
Thanks, Aman. And I think moving on, just to give you a view of a more strategic level of our business, what we're kind of working on. So it's good to talk. So I think throughout this, we've really tried to engage with the entirety of our customer base, so they really understand and can start to build confidence and trust through their traveller networks. And we've run several traveller workshops with our customers to really gain a sense from their key travellers and their road warriors as to how they feel about travelling again. To a really mixed bag, I think if we look at ourselves, I can't wait to get back on the road, and probably will be too gung-ho about it, there's some people that will be feeling quite an air of intrepidation doing that. So we've got to make sure that they engaging with key traveller work groups has been quite useful for us. So yeah, definitely good to talk across our client base and also our supply base. So I think if we look at the refund processes and future booking processes for all of our suppliers, be that rail, car, air or hotel, they're all quite different. So it's trying to look at how we wade through the complexity of booking travel in the new world and simplify that and make it easy for our customers. So ongoing conversations, both at a strategic level and day-to-day with our customers, has been vital. Safeguarding our business. So as a business, as I say, we're family owned, we do have minimal debt, and I think the furlough scheme has worked really well for us. We have 2/3 of our staff in furlough, but as we're starting to see booking numbers start to increase, we'll slowly but surely bring people back on furlough, but it's allowed us to protect the entirety of our workforce. And a huge effort's gone into the debt collection side, both in terms of refunds from suppliers and also outstanding bills from customers. So that's helped us kind of balance the sheet. And I think the last thing is not resting on our laurels. So we're continually looking at technology and developing our roadmap. And what we have recently applied for is a government grant in partnership with Kingston University called Project Grapevine. What Project Grapevine is it's an opportunity to really develop personalisation and researching machine learning methods within the business travel environment. So I think what sometimes seems really simple and easy in a leisure world, we want to bring that same machine learning and personalisation into the business travel world. So some exciting things happening, and definitely personalisation we see as being absolute key throughout the pandemic and beyond. So Aman, back over to you.
Okay, so looking at what the future of business travel will look like post COVID-19. So there's 2 schools of thought. There's the pessimist and the optimist. I'll start off with the pessimistic view because these are unprecedented times. So we're very much in the theory stage, and I'll just pick out a few of these. The first key one being that relating to video telephone technology, which was something that we're all using now. Zoom, we're very familiar with. There are some theory that would believe that the majority of meetings will now take place like this. It's not something I agree with. I can't see any of you. I don't know how you're reacting to what we're taking. Some of you have got the kettle on, the TV going. I don't really know. So it's difficult to engage as a human being with things like this. Then there's the regulatory constraints. I saw a question pop up regarding quarantine and the impact that that's going to have. We'll talk through that at the question stage, but you've also got the social distancing laws. I'm sure a lot of you have seen with the government's daily briefing yesterday in regards to reducing it from 2 meters to 1 meter. It seems really absurd, but that makes a huge impact to, the hospitality industry, rail, car, all of these factors. The gap between 1 and 2 meters takes the capacity from the average restaurant from 30%, 20 to 30%, to as much as 70%, which brings them to about break-even point. So it's huge impacts government regulations can have. If we move on to the next one, the positive side, the glass full people believe that travel was rising, but the 10 years before COVID-19 has seen unprecedented levels of growth in the travel industry. It was very much boom time, and so having read surveys, looking at it, there was a survey recently of 550 American buyers, travel buyers in the top companies, and 58% of them said they intend to return back to travel within 6 months at the same levels they were doing before. We've also encountered tech and health pandemics before. Things like video technology, Zoom existed long before the pandemic, but the need to go out and see people remains. There's also, quite critically, something that gets forgotten is if there is a vaccine, that's a game changer. We also have to look at, in terms of government stimulus packages, we've all seen the CARES packages, the factors that are coming from our government, such as the furlough scheme that was extended. It was only originally expected to be around for 2-3 months. And we've seen that extended out. There's likely to be other packages because we're all in this together. It's a global wide problem rather than just one particular industry. Okay. So what's my prediction? Looking at it, so I think we need to be realistic. There are going to be some travel suppliers that are not going to come through this on the other side. There's been much talk about speculation about what's happening with Virgin Atlantic in the UK. Richard Branson's eagerly attempting to get some government support. That's not yet been forthcoming. But what we're likely to see is less suppliers as a result of this, but also in terms of having less capacity if the social distancing rules remain. You're looking at it from a hotel perspective. Hotels are currently going through cleaning measures whereby they have somebody staying at the hotel and in a 24-hour break between someone staying in that room again. So that's cutting their capacity in half. So what I predict is that when you take a flight, your expectation that, the airport that you're using, there'll be some terminals that will be permanently closed. There may be some regional airports that will disappear. And then you're likely to see less airlines operating on that route and the flight schedule reducing. That, for the next 18 months, is likely to be the environment that we're in. There's going to be more legislation on travel. So, for example, as the technology advances, we're seeing more you know, heat screening, thermal screening happening, and becoming more involved in legislation. We've seen that you're now being required when you travel on TfL and other factors to wear a mask. Some countries want you to have gloves on too. So there's all of these factors that go along. And of course, quarantine. The UK brought that about. We may see that return if there's a second wave. Other countries may reintroduce those quarantine factors. All of these are increasing the traveller demand for information, because the landscape as we knew it has completely altered. So your traveller will now demand more information in regards to, okay, what are the provisions I need to take before I travel? One of the things that I get asked quite a lot is, when I'm traveling out, how early do I need to arrive at the airport? The expectation, you would think, is that I would need to arrive earlier than I did before. 3 hours for international, 2 hours for economy, domestic and European. That hasn't changed as yet in the UK. There is Charles de Gaulle, Madrid airport, for example, is saying that you should actually come with less time, 90 minutes before your flight. Whereas there's other airports in Singapore, they're asking you to arrive as much as 6 hours before your intended departure time. And that very much depends on the level of boxes you have to tick as you go along, and the size of the airport, the ability for it to have that capacity within its building and maintain social distancing. These are all factors that we're working on to provide our client base today. So before we return to travel, what are the pillars that we need? Without any one of these factors that you see on screen, government confidence, business confidence, supplier confidence, and traveler confidence, travel cannot return. Any one of those is missing, and we don't have business travel. If we move to government confidence, I'll just go through what that means. So first of all, good sources of information is gov.uk, the FCO. So the government at the moment is not giving out a great deal of confidence for travel, because they've implemented this quarantine. For anybody who leaves the UK and returning all international travelers would have to self-isolate for 14 days. Clearly, that's going to kill a lot of desire to travel, especially in the business sector. You could go out for a one-day meeting and face quarantine on one side and quarantine on the other. So it's a whole month out. It's not really realistic. The FCO have recently scaled back their advisory against travel. Before it was do not travel, and now it's avoid non-essential travel. That's quite a key determinant for your travel insurance, because they're saying no non-essential travel is to be avoided. Your insurance, your travel insurance for a holiday or whatever, at the moment is invalid. There's the international aviation sector. So look at IATA for more information in regards to, they're doing some great work in terms of what airlines are doing to make travel safe as much as possible. You'll see things like HEPA filter, which is the kind of filters they use in an operating theatre in hospitals. Airlines are putting those together among a variety of other factors. For example, they're thermal screening their staff, they're cleaning out their, disinfecting the actual cabins after every flight. It's actually the safest, cleanest work environment that you could find, oddly enough. And obviously use the Business Travel Association as well as a form of information. We at Grey Doors are collating all of this information, as well as general opinions, public industry perspectives, and putting that together within our website, which there's a link there. And that's available not only to our client base, but for yourselves. I encourage you to go on there, and it gives you information in regards to the borders that I showed the screenshots of earlier. Moving on, so what about your business? So how do business return confidence? So once we have government confidence, then businesses will start to travel at the moment it sits at domestic travel, which there's more freedom to do. But as the government opens up borders, you'll be required to look at what we strongly advise, and we're working with our clients today, is to review their travel policy. There's factors that you need to consider in terms of what is defined as essential travel. Who is defining that? For example, Laura and I go out to several client meetings in a week. We can do as many as 3 or 4. The reality is that if you're now going out, your business may decide that only one person should travel and not the typical workforce that would go along to a meeting. And would that be a 2-day, what was previously maybe a 2-day trip becomes a 1-day, full-day trip in terms of getting everything in and avoiding the need to stay overnight and potentially, encounter more issues, more touch points at hotels, local transport, and also the fear of getting stuck out in a different country. That involves, so defining what essential travel is. It also involves strengthening the approval process and training for approvers. I myself have experienced talking to approvers is that the vast majority of the time they click approved. We find that 95% of the bookings that are made through an approval process are selected as approved. I can see that falling back, but people need to be trained to be able to have the confidence and the ability to decline travel that is not deemed as essential. You also need to look at clearly accurate profile data. For me, things like respiratory issues, other health factors that put you at traditionally as classed as at risk. In a day where we were more guarded with our data, but we're now facing the prospect of having our locations track and traced. So we may be more open, more inclined to share our pre-existing health issues if it means we're more given a more bespoke service. Also, payment methods. Us as a business, we usually hold per month as much as 2 million. Above that, in fact, of our clients is debt in a way that our clients to spend. We book for them their travel and retain that. Then we build those back out. So in a way, we are their creditors. And so you'd be looking at options like this in a world where cash flow has been very much on the subject matter, because good businesses have not been lost. It's not been the fact that businesses can't make revenue. It's the fact that they don't have cash in the bank, which has seen several businesses go by. So companies will be looking at ways in which they can defer cost, and using a travel management company is a desirable approach to that. I hand over to Laura now to talk about Traveller.
Thanks, Aman. So firstly, I'll talk about supplier confidence. So I think when we talk about supplier confidence, it's probably 2 main parts. One is suppliers in terms of any airlines that you have agreed deals with, any hotels that you have negotiated rates with. And I think secondly to that is your travel management company. What we would suggest and advise is that you throw it all up in the air and review your entire programme. So what we will see is, as Aman alluded to earlier, there'll be suppliers that don't come out of this other side. There'll be suppliers that the deals that you had in place before may not be as competitive before. So looking at reaching out to your whole supply chain and reviewing what deals you've got on the table. And also really talking quite candidly about what your predicted volumes will be, I think is quite key. As Aman mentioned earlier, there is some key points as to why you should use a travel management company. I think they've always been there, but I think at this time it's heightened. So payment is definitely one. If you can get up to 45 days credit and defer payment, that's a great selling point. Obviously, duty of care and having people who are, people on the ground who are booking travel all day, every day. They know the ins and outs of what's happening across the globe, and the entire service piece. So that 24-hour assistance. I think we've got quite a lot of travel bookers on this call today, and I think when it comes to travel bookers, you don't want to be taking calls at 2 in the morning from someone that's stuck in an airport, can't get out, stuck in quarantine, whatever it is. That 24-hour service is quite important. So I think review your TMC relationship and how that's going to work for you in this new world. Get them to advise, guide and steer on your travel policy, and also reach out to your supply chain if you've got negotiated deals in place at the minute, and see what you can do. And I think lastly, I suppose if we look at suppliers, you've got the collapse of Flybe. Airlines are opening up their flight paths at different times. So for instance, EasyJet will open up 75% of their routes by August. So what we're starting to see as well with the supply chain is they're opening their routes and the properties at quite different times. So engagement with the entirety of your supply chain is really quite key. When it comes to negotiating and innovating, data is always key. And even if it's data from the old world, we as a travel management company will be able to look at that and make some predictions on what your data is likely to look like. So yeah, granular data, if you have it, is really key. If you've been self-booking, speak to someone in your finance team to look at what overall you've been spending and what it says on the expense claims if you've been self-booking. But yeah, the more data you can get together now in one central place, it arms you with more information to go and have some really decent conversations with your supplier chain. And then finally, traveller confidence. So I kind of mentioned it earlier that engaging with your key travellers and senior stakeholders is obviously imperative. Confidence has been a big problem, as we've seen throughout. I think there's been a few questions come up on that, which we'll answer at the end. So seek some advice of your travel management company. Whilst you may not be the biggest company or have the biggest travel program, what your travel management company will be able to do is benchmark and give you some advice of what they've done with similar customers of similar size and similar sectors. So for instance, our Cambridge customers, broadly speaking, all have the same kind of booking and travelling habits. So we can start to advise and steer on what your peer group are doing, which I think is quite key. Emergency contact details. So what we would suggest is in every booking confirmation that you send for your travellers, that it's got your insurance details on there, it's got your travel management details on there, and it's got any resource and reference points on there. So the traveller in one central place has all the contact details that they need, whatever happens. There's also risk management companies, say the likes of International SOS are a company we work quite a lot with. They offer that feet on the ground medical advice for if, say, I don't know, you get struck down with a stomach bug in India. They'll pick you up, take you to a hospital, and make sure you're kind of covered and get you home safely. That kind of on the ground support. So all of that emergency contact detail, that whole process and that whole information part is really worth ironing out and thinking through and making sure you give your traveller all the information that they need. Amanda did mention earlier about offline booking process. So as a bit of an insight, at Grey Dawes, usually on a monthly basis, we have an online adoption. So all the travel bookings that are made, usually about between 50 and 60% of them are made on our online booking platform. And customers are quite used and quite comfortable in the normal world to pop online and book simple point-to-point trips themselves. What we've seen throughout the pandemic and beyond is we now have an online adoption rate across the company of 20%. And that's nothing wrong with our technology. It's more the fact that the travellers who are making a trip that they've not made since lockdown, they understandably feel quite apprehensive and would rather pick up the phone and talk to somebody and just get a sense for what they need to consider, and just to make, add to that confidence. So if and I did this myself with whether I was wondering whether to cancel my honeymoon or not recently. Luckily I booked it through Grey Dawes, and Paul, who booked it for me, I actually wanted to call him and say, what do you think I should do? So I think it applies for whatever kind of travel you do. If you've got someone that's got 20 odd years of expertise that can help and guide you and is doing that job all day every day, it really does help. And the traveller toolkit, so Grey Dawes are in the process of putting together a full traveller toolkit to really talk about PPE and kind of what's required in different countries and in different airports. Again, quite a key part. So at least, if you're touching down in Paris, you know exactly what is going to be needed in terms of gloves, wipes, all of that kind of stuff. What I'm going to do is pass over to a man who's going to give you a bit more detail and a bit of a taste for the kind of process flows and traveller toolkits that we are creating.
So we Grey Doors are quite fortunate because, as Laura mentioned, our chair, our CEO Suzanne is chairperson at the BTA, and so we've been given some insights as to what the new normal for air travel is likely to look like, and this is the kind of process flows that we've been provided with. I just wanted to give you this graphic so you can see the change in which a traveller and a supplier, the kind of advisories that they've been given in terms of the various touch points, even regarding printing out your own luggage tags. Previously, you would have that part, you know, if you're taking putting it in the hold, you would speak to an individual. But now the idea is that you'd have a QR code and you would show that on a screen, and it would print out your luggage tags and you would put those on. So these are the kind of advisories. There's so many steps here. One thing I will say is not to be too daunted, because I am old enough to remember post 9/11, you know, and there was a lot of scaremongering that, never going to fly again, you know, because going through an airport is going to be a nightmare. You know, the time in which you'll be going through the airport is going to be longer than the time in which you're in the air. And we've all got used to those. And so far, there's not that much difference taking place. The speed in which they'll be doing thermo heating monitoring has been trialed in Heathrow. As I say, there's not been any change in the advisory in which time you should travel. What we're doing as a travel management company is just equipping our travelers with process flows that are, you know, a little bit more clearer than this, I would hope, we've put together, is to give them those advisories ahead of time. What size, in terms of what allowance do you have for your hand sanitizer? There's some that are saying 100 mils. There's other countries, other airports saying 400 mils. Really, there's a lot of change. Some are insisting or mandating the use of gloves. Others are not. There's also the question of what happens if I register a temperature that is above 38.5. Does that mean that I will be stuck in some kind of quarantine, you know? And therefore what we're putting together is alleviating those concerns, because often that actually isn't the case. So it's to demonstrate what happens if those kind of questions. I develop symptoms, and what are the processes I should go through as an ordinary traveler traveling today. We're actually doing some videos on people returning, the first people going back to travel, and videoing themselves going through the airport, all the processes they would face, and putting that online. So we're also doing interviews with travelers. One is happening on Friday with one of those individuals who have returned to travel. So we are posting that on our available for all people, not just our own client base. So keep an eye on that on our working from home page or traveller toolkit page on the Grey Doors website. So I won't go into this too much. It's a minefield.
I think what it does is shows the framework that our staff will be working towards. And so whilst we wouldn't want to give a traveller this amount of information, it would be nudges and prompts as and when they need them, but it just shows the kind of considerations and the frameworks that we're working to behind the scenes. And you know, having to kind of re-educate our staff as well, you know, very experienced staff members, well, actually they're returning to book travel in a really different way. So yeah, this is the kind of complexity of what we go into. But as a summary, because I can see we've got loads of questions, which is great. In summary, you know, travel will bounce back. We're an incredibly resilient industry, and it will bounce back. You know, we've come through the ash cloud, we've come through 9/11. questionably this might take longer to bounce back from, but you know, travel will bounce back. And I think now's the time to future-proof your programme. And I think what we've seen internally at Grey Dawes is actually we've signed more business in terms of new contracts during lockdown than we had before, because I think buyers are really starting to see, one, the value of a TMC, and two, if we can give you some proactive support and advice and hold your hand through this, it's going to make it a lot easier for you. So now's the time, and don't wait till you know someone needs to travel in your organisation to think about it. You know, review your travel policy, look at which suppliers you're working with, and really set your stall out and future-proof your programme, because you know these things, it takes time to make the right decisions for your business. So we definitely suggest now's a good time. So thank you to all of you for listening, and thank you to Tony and Alicia for inviting us. What we would say is we'd offer a complimentary consulting offer through a man. So our details are on screen. You can also contact us through the One Nucleus page on the Grey Dawes website. But what the consulting offer broadly means is that we can analyse your specific travel data and give you some recommendations on how we'd reframe your programme, and also have a look at your travel policy, benchmark it against similar sized customers in similar sectors, and give you some advice on how to tweak and tailor it in the new world. Whatever your travel policy looks like, I would suggest, you know, a form of health check, whether that's internally or with us or with another travel company. Definitely worth doing now, because I would suggest that probably everyone could do with a bit of a tweak in such exceptional circumstances. But yeah, we're happy to engage. Please feel free to reach out to us, whether you want to partner with us as your travel management company or not. That's totally up to you, but the complimentary consulting offer is there just as a bit of a support mechanism as a One Nucleus member. So on that note, I will unmute Alicia, who I think is going to kind of chair the questions, and myself and Aman will kind of.
Just on that, I think our commercial director has been answering some of the questions on there. So just so if you see Dave Bishop answering your questions, he's not just the key.
I thought he kept quiet for a long time. I thought it was unusual. Great.
He is part of Grey Dawes.
Good to know.
So if you want to chair this piece, then Alicia, we'll just chip in with the answers as and where we can.
Sure. Well, thank you both very much, Dora and Aman. That was fab. That was a really good presentation, and it engaged with some of the key points that our members had brought up in the survey that we did prior to the webinar, and also probably questions that other members were thinking about as well. We have about 10 minutes until the end. So I did note a couple of themes, the questions. So quarantining, sort of desirability of travel, and finance or financial considerations. So in terms of quarantine, this is a theme that came up in the survey. So we had a question which was around, what impact do you anticipate from the UK 14-day quarantine requirement? What changes might occur, and when do you think it will be waived?
Well, it's the biggest problem we have in our industry at the moment is that quarantine. And just to give you an idea, is that several airlines and tour packages had really penciled in mid-June for recommencement of flights, but that has been scaled back now to push back. We are hopeful that there was going to be a legal challenge spearheaded by British Airways and their parent company. That has been put back now because there is some hope that the first review of this quarantine, which is at the end of the month, is likely to see it dramatically scaled back and have agreements in place with predominantly tourist-based countries like Spain, Portugal, France, and potentially Germany being involved in those. You know, what we would like to see is America as well included within that. We're lobbying for that in terms of, because it's a key business hub. As I mentioned, you look at it from a practical measure. flying out for a business trip and having 14 days isolation is just a no-go. You know, you can't spend that much time outside the business. So yeah, that hopefully that answers the quarantine side. But I definitely say watch this space. I do think that it will change dramatically once this first review is sort of taken at the end of the month.
Thanks, Aman. Another question in relation to that, and I think Dave may have covered it on chat, but just for the benefit of everyone who wasn't looking at the chat box. So is your industry talking to the government with regards to the quarantine? What is your view? How are you engaging with them on the subject?
Yeah, I believe that we're, you know, is even today, we're engaging quite frequently. We're through Suzanne chairing the Business Travel Association. She's having a lot of conversations on lobbying with key suppliers. You know, it's not just aviation, it's also the hotels who rely a lot on, particularly the ones around airports. So there is a number of discussions to try to get this scaled back. It's there at the moment, and it will remain there for 3 weeks. There's not going to be any change between now and then. But the idea is, and we're getting increasingly confident that after the first 3 weeks it will change. Otherwise, you know, that it's one of those factors where you've got to consider the level of employment that the travel industry carries, and also the safety measures they're putting in place. I mentioned those HEPA filters within an airline. You know, the airline industry, much like it was, much like it still is, with carbon offsetting programs, it gets a really bad rap, but it's actually at the forefront of innovation when it comes to carbon offsetting and now health, making travel safe. It's a key part of it all. So yeah, I would say watch this space and confidently believe that we will see air bridging bilateral agreements with key trading partners at the end of the month.
Thank you, Aman. So alongside sort of quarantine issues and fears of becoming stranded, another important theme that was raised in the survey was financial considerations and implications. So the first question received was, how does the cost of fully flexible tickets purchased now compare to pre-COVID-19 levels?
Good question. So what we're noticing is that as it stands at the moment, if you try to book a ticket, say for October, November, when you foresee that travel will ramp up, you'll see that the price has increased. So because airlines are very much aware that they've had increased costs associated with putting all of this together. Airports are having increased costs, which they're passing on to the airlines in terms of putting all the technological and screening factors in place. You've had issues in regards to availability, social distancing in terms of capacity sizes shrinking. So it's undoubted that, you know, even in hotels, the cleaning measures that they have to put in place. So they are increasing prices. My personal belief is that once the borders open up and people start to travel again, being allowed to travel again, you will see that the prices decrease as they try to encourage you back in, and that will involve the idea of fully flexible tickets. People will not be purchasing so far in advance. You know, I don't believe that will be the case. So there will be more flexibility given without the need for it to be fully flexible in the traditional manner, because if there's another COVID-19 issue, well, COVID-20, if we would call it that, a second wave perhaps, is that airlines will be keen to perform better than what they did previously, I must say, in regards to holding on to your refund revenue, the refunds money, and, you know, causing complications there. I do think that there will be more flexible conditions already built into every ticket. And we're certainly seeing that. And we as a TMC are certainly lobbying those suppliers to encourage that good faith and that trust with your suppliers, because holding on to your money is not on, to be honest.
Thanks, Saman. A question here also relating sort of with insurance, travel insurance. So if an employee became unwell during a business trip with COVID-19 symptoms, do you think business travel insurance will cover their treatment?
At the moment, no. I mean, I'm not an insurance expert. You would have to get us the standard terms and conditions. The answer is no, especially with the FCO advising against travel today. And that's unlikely to change. You know, if a traveler has COVID-19 symptoms and there's costs involved in that, then at this present time, there is no factors involved. So I would certainly be going back to your insurance companies and negotiating that in, and reviewing the premiums associated to that.
So a question here also relating to cost implications. Do you think the cost of travel is going to increase a lot? I'm not sure if you may have already covered that in some aspects. And what do you think airlines will be doing with regards to social distancing?
Okay, so I'll answer the cost question just to give some statistics behind it. The expectation is that between now and the summer, you know, so right now, if you try to answer, if you try to book a ticket, as I say, you're likely to see the cost is higher. When they open back up, you're likely to see some reductions. Say, our prediction is that there's likely to be as much as a third of the standard prices that you'd be seeing today in the air hotel spaces, as they try to encourage you back in. But there's a bottleneck of travel. Demand will grow. You know, as I mentioned, let's put aside the idea that there's a vaccine around the corner, but even if there's not, we will learn to live around this virus. We already are. But so one of the aspects is that you look at all the summer events that were pushed back from this year are all into next year. My colleague Laura was due to be married by now, off the market, bless her. And then, so those events have been pushed to next year in a large degree, and there's not enough weekends to cover the wedding market alone next summer. So people will have midweek weddings, and those will fill up hotels. So that those factors need to be taken into account. So my personal belief is this time next year, you will see prices increase back to pre-COVID levels or near about that level.
We are almost time up here, but just to answer, or just to have a couple more questions around sort of the desirability of travel and willingness. So there's a question that asks, staff reluctance to travel is a main factor, but there's also the concern about companies receiving visitors in. So is there any evidence that organisations want to keep visitors out of their sites?
Oh, interesting. A very good question. So at this moment, when this occurred, just before COVID-19, you know, really reached its peak, I had several meetings cancelled with being informed to have them on Zoom like we are today. So far, what we're hearing is that people are keen to have traveler clients return. It depends on the trip. If you have internal, we're seeing lots of policies change on internal meetings to have them more on this facility. But I would say that in terms of, you know, having clients that you need to impress, I can't see an environment where that's being discouraged.
I think there's kind of two dependent factors there really as well. What we're seeing from our customers is it really varies by sector. So our financial clients are really starting to want to travel and are booking ahead, booking fully flexible tickets, and which are usually, you know, anything that's a big ticket value, we're starting to see come through. I think what we will see, and if the cost of a trip has a return on investment for it, so for instance a sales trip, we will see that generally people will still want to buy after seeing the whites of the seller's eyes. So we don't think we'll move into a world where people will be comfortable selling in a virtual way. So I think it will depend a little bit on purpose of the meeting. Internal travel we think will decline. I think most companies now are quite used to talking to each other in a virtual world. We will probably, as a company ourselves, move to a more virtual working space post COVID, and not have as many offices and as many people sitting in desks. So I think that it depends on the type of travel and the sector of which people work.
Just one last question.
Sure.
Do you think the factors such as different check-in times across countries and differing requirements, what travellers may need to wear, will, I think, put off potential travellers from a trip? So I guess it's around confidence again as well.
Confidence and probably back to my previous point on what's the ROI on that trip. So if it's a trip that you could potentially do in a virtual world, or that you can't quite clearly define what the ROI is on that trip, then yeah, it could put people off. If it's you're going to do a deal that's worth X amount of money and there's a clear ROI, then we would see that those kind of trips will still happen. So I think it will depend upon what's the ROI of that trip.
Brilliant. Thank you so much again, Laura and Aman, and thank you everyone very much for tuning in. We've had a request for the presentation slides and also to share those with relevant colleagues. So we will be sending a follow-up email. I think we discussed we can share a form of the slides, can't we? Laura,
yeah, we're happy to share the slides. If anyone wants to reach out to us to talk about their specific company and do some specific consulting work with you, we're happy to do that. We'll send the slides over to you, Alicia, to send out. And we have got the toolkit that's just about to be launched, which will be kind of our go-to spot for our customers. So if anyone wants access to that toolkit, let us know, and we can add you to the mailing list on that one as well. But thanks ever so much for your time. It's great participation, loads of great questions.
Yes, thank you for the questions. It's been brilliant, excellent stuff. So I just wish everyone a very good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining today.
Great. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Everyone.